Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Automation, the latest in the series of Smarter Practice webinars. We're, again, hosted in glorious Macclesfield. Not quite as sunny as it was last time we sat down. It is distinctly cold this morning, and two of us have got jumpers on, so that tells you what we're dealing with this morning. I'm just waiting. I can see people are just dropping in now, so let's get going. So welcome, everybody. I'm Richard Higginbotham. I'm co-founder at VaultConnect. So we secure and automate critical processes. As usual, I'm joined here by Alan Hyams. Morning, Alan.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alan Hyams, business performance coach.
And our host and our technology provider, Ramesh. Morning, Ramesh.
Morning, Richard. Thanks for the introduction. So everyone, I'm Ramesh Menon. I'm one of the co-founders of Cevitr. We offer organizations digital workers, and we'll talk about that.
Very good. So we've got a pretty packed agenda this morning, but this is definitely something that follows on from what we've done previously. We follow a consistent format, typically 30 minutes of presentation, although it'll be very much discussion based this morning, because I think it's safe to say, looking at my colleagues here, we have all got a view. If you have any questions that come up, use the Q&A button to raise a question. If we spot it and we can tackle it there and then, we will do. If not, we'll come to it at the end. We should have around 10 to 15 minutes at the end to deal with questions and answers. For any of you who came to our last session, we managed to have a fire drill in the middle of our question and answer session. There are none scheduled this morning, and unless it's real, we shall soldier on regardless as before. Anybody who wants to access anything afterwards, is the recording of the webinar will be available on demand on the VaultConnect website. So, previously, in the Smarter Practice webinar series, we started off before the summer holidays, discussing really what the opportunities might be and what was holding them back in a typical accounting practice in the productivity gaps and missed opportunity. We then went to look at actually some of the apocryphal quotes around what's going to happen to jobs and roles in accountancy with artificial intelligence and automation and what that might mean. And we actually kind of said, well, actually, it's an opportunity to rewrite the future. And the last session that we did right before the summer holidays, and we all broke up, was the advisory opportunity and looking at what could be a brighter future in and around there. And that's certainly, Alan, that's something that's very close to your heart.
Absolutely.
So when we talked about advisory work, I mean, I think the consistent finding is most organizations know that there's an opportunity out there, but very, very few are taking full advantage.
I think that's absolutely right. It's a big step to take. It's easy to talk about, but it means breaking out of compliance lock, which people find very hard.
Yeah. So we talked there about the services that the majority of firms typically undertake, being around bookkeeping, around payroll, around preparing tax returns.
And of course, preparing statutory accounts.
Yeah, which means that they hold a lot of data around the business clients that they have. And that really should provide them the platform for opportunity.
Absolutely. I think it's something that we accountants take for granted, all that data. The lawyers would love to have it.
Yeah. So we know a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of value that could be added through there, but it's just not getting done. And one of the challenges is that we're busy being busy.
Absolutely. That I come across that more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to question, are we doing the right things? And how much are we spending working on our businesses as well as in it?
Yeah. So you did a piece of work a while ago where you calculated what the productivity gap was in a typical accounting firm.
Yes, in the average accounting firm. There's no such thing as an average accounting firm, of course, but anonymizing it by fee earner, I reckon the productivity gap was £10,000.
And so that's that's really looking at missed opportunity for billable work because of, I'd say poor process, but inefficient processes.
There's two things. There's the inefficiency, which of course is a big number. The other big number is over-servicing, giving a Rolls-Royce service for the price of a Mini.
Right. So there's two aspects to that. It's operations and presenting what you're going to do for a client.
And talking about the value of what you're doing for them.
So there's value to be had, but actually we're constrained by the compliance work. And I mean, compliance lock is a term we used. I'm not sure it's our term that we can kind of claim, but it seems to be something that describes the condition where you're that focused on delivering the compliance work for clients that there's no room to do anything else.
That's right.
It's a constraint on growth and it's a constraint on value that you can derive from the practice.
Absolutely.
Okay. So as we work forward, now this is something that we're focused in very much around accounting practices, but I think you can kind of, if you take the helicopter view up to as high as it will go, it's something that's similar to any service delivery business. We're a function of the human resources enabled by technology. So our human resources are a function of, I'll use grey hair, but it's our skills, experience, and expertise. I mean, I have no hair, but it's my acquired knowledge over time, my grey matter, which is my ability to make judgments, think creatively, and innovate solutions. But I use technology to help me, and I spend an enormous amount of time with my fingers on keyboards. So grey hair and grey matter and fingers on keyboards are kind of the variables that we have to play with. If we're in compliance lock, there's an awful lot of time with fingers on keyboards or mice, combing through spreadsheets.
Absolutely. And it's a question of, are we best doing that or doing something else?
Yeah. And so if we look at a professional service like accounting, there's a lot of technical knowledge and skill that's bound up in the humans who are carrying out a lot of those tasks.
Absolutely.
Which does two things: is there's an opportunity to add value with that, but also is that resource costs money.
Of course it does. And if we can make the whole thing more efficient, and even if we could pick out half of the productivity gap and plug it and release that cash, that's pure cash, pure bottom line.
So automation's about unlocking that potential. So it's not necessarily about replacing people. It's about removing the low-level tasks that those people have to do that hold them back. So we've got grey hair, grey matter tied up with fingers on keyboards. If we can remove the fingers from keyboards, we can release that potential to add value from people. Okay.
Absolutely, Richard. In fact, the whole point about lost opportunity, because when you have people with experience, gray hair, working on fingers on keyboards, the opportunity is there, but it's lost in time that's not productive.
Yep. I think we'll kind of dwell on this beforehand as well. This is not about replacing people with technology. I think McKinsey have done an interesting piece of work where I think it's 40% of 60% of people's work can be automated, but only a tiny fraction of jobs, I think it's around 8%, can be automated completely. So this is about augmenting the human capability.
You're spot on there, Richard, because the whole point about automation, and everybody focuses just on the cost element of it. But the real benefit is where what you do with the freed up time that automation enables in individuals. And it's never freeing up an entire person. It's about freeing up a percentage of your time to do more productive tasks, which helps the organization.
Fantastic. So what and how? Now we introduced robotic process automation. Ramesh, you refer to it as digital workmates, or actually you've named him, haven't you? Or it?
Yes, so Joe, meet Joe. Joe is a general neutral term actually. And the reason we have a name Joe is because in all cases, you find technology of this nature complementing a business user, right? Be it in the finance side or accounting side or in sales, you're actually using this technology to take away the keyboard work of a business user. So Joe is in effect a digital worker who's there to help you.
So Joe's there to help, sit behind, part of the same team as humans. And the kind of tasks that a Joe or a robot can undertake is much the same as we're doing when we're stuck with fingers on keyboards. So opening emails, sending emails.
Absolutely.
Gathering information from the web, pushing it in, data entry, working in Excel, all of those. Well, if it's repetitive, and you can actually put some rule behind it, you can get Joe to do it. So if you, for example, you're taking data from an email and putting it into a system, that's perfect for Joe to do. So think of it. If you are using two systems to take data from one, put it into the other, you're wasting your time. Get Joe to do it. Yep. Very good. So let's have a look at where these manual processes start to come in. So for example, let's use a generic business example. There can't be many businesses in the UK that don't have to pay suppliers, which means that they receive invoices, and invoices by their nature will arrive in a variety of formats: paper, PDF, might be in an office document. In the largest companies, there'll be EDI, electronic invoicing, but we receive invoices. Those invoices then need to be checked to see that they correspond with something you were expecting to pay for. So goods receipts, is it from a known supplier, known activity, the value as expected? Once you've done that, somebody needs to authorize it. If there's any queries, they need to be managed. And then finally, payment can be transferred. So that process, and of course, filing documents, is probably consistent across most organizations. But then when we break those individual tasks down, we can see that actually in a number of areas, there's an opportunity where, okay, so Joe can turn information from multiple documents into structured data.
Absolutely. So for the number of customers, what we do is Joe scans the email boxes. You get invoices from customers. So Joe's been trained to identify which set of suppliers you need to process the invoice. The minute Joe sees an invoice from that particular supplier, Joe downloads the PDF, extracts the data, puts it in an Excel sheet, loads it onto the system, goes through the workflows. And the best part is not all this. Joe notifies the business user, hey, by the way, I have done all this, and this is the output.
So in doing that, what Joe's done is created structured information.
Yeah.
So in the form of a spreadsheet or in another system, which makes it easy then to compare that structured information with information in other systems for validation.
Absolutely.
You can give Joe some rules to follow. Joe could even authorize some of those payments. So you could apply a delegated level of authority to Joe. So figures below a certain amount. And I know, Alan, is the first place that you go to is kind of risk within this process. Is you may not want to automate releasing money from the business. But the thing is, you can simplify the job of authorizing whether that money should be released or not.
Absolutely. You might well say that every payment over a certain amount, a trigger amount, has to have a human intervention as a safety check.
Absolutely.
And maybe a test of some others. But that's up to you to decide what your controls are going to be. It's purely customizable to what suits you and your business.
Yep.
Yeah. And one of the best practices there in terms of automation is you automate in stages. So when you look at an end-to-end process, like what Richard said, which part of this process is your biggest pain? Where are you taking the maximum effort? Automate that. Releasing the money could still be something a person, with judgment can do. Yep. And you don't automate that at all.
Yeah. But even something as contentious maybe as managing queries is we've received an invoice from this amount. It doesn't correspond with any of our purchase orders or any of those. There's a query to be raised. The supplier who sent the invoice needs contacting. Even Joe can even put structure and automation around that process.
Absolutely. So for example, you receive an invoice from a known supplier, you match it and you find that it doesn't match against any PO, any purchase order, and you need to notify the supplier. You could get Joe to automatically write to that supplier saying, hey, Mr. Supplier, your invoice doesn't match our internal systems. Can you please clarify?
Very good. Now, we've made a lot of claims about Joe's capability here, so I think it's time that we saw Joe in action. So we talked about sending emails. So I'm going to click on this, and this is going to run away with itself in a moment. But this process here is...
Oh, yes. So Joe here is logging on to a CRM system, in this case, Salesforce, and chasing up payments from people who have not paid. So this is a customer with a particular subscription-based model, and their customers have to pay every month. And there are certain customers who have missed their payments. So Joe logs on every day or every week into the CRM system and checks for the payment due date. The payment due date is passed. Joe writes to the customer, copies the sales guy and saying, hey, Mr. Sales Guy, your customer's not paid. So your commission's going to be blocked. And there it is.
So as long as there's a reason to initiate the process,
yes,
and the process is standard, Joe can pick that up. So we're looking at a templated email here. That template could say anything, and it's just using data from Salesforce or the report generated from Salesforce to put that in, and then a reason code to put in the text.
Absolutely spot on there.
Okay, so. Now, we also talk about how many processes involve combing through Excel spreadsheets. So as I click through here and get through here, so we have Joe here dealing with an Excel spreadsheet and getting data into a format that we want it in.
Exactly, because a lot of processes, you will find that there is data being taken from one system and put into the other. But in many cases, you have to have a structure to that data. And in most cases, when you talk about a report that is being output, that's in the form of a CSV or Excel.
Yeah.
And you can train Joe to manipulate that data to whatever form you want before you put it into systems.
So it's perfectly capable of carrying out spreadsheet tasks. And I mean, this particular system is a Microsoft Dynamics, but this is just working in the client's system, and actually this is posting data in there.
Yeah, and this goes back to your previous case about accounts payable. So here we are looking at and registering the details on Dynamics 365 from data that has been extracted from PDF files.
So what we've just seen there is something happening very, very quickly. But it is just somebody doing data entry tasks. It's the stuff that somebody's doing by dragging and dropping with mice and by typing things in with a keyboard.
Absolutely.
So if we look at, well, it's a process that probably exists in most accounting firms, because if you're doing somebody's accounts, they'll probably have staff, and those staff need paying, and you're well placed to deliver it.
Yes, quite often we'll do payroll bureau work for clients. And of course, the one thing we're expected to do is get it right every time.
Well, I think we're all sensitive to making sure we get paid correctly or paid enough.
Yes,
certainly. But yeah, making errors on a client's payroll is not acceptable.
Correct.
So somebody always suffers from that error. And that process, I mean, I guess if you looked across the UK, there's an army of people carrying out payroll tasks in accounting firms and dedicated bureau.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm right in saying that pretty much, is there some technical skill involved and some software that you need to do it, but actually the payroll service delivered by one firm is not a lot different to a payroll service.
Absolutely. You end up with some data from the client, probably on the spreadsheet. That's got to be entered into your proprietary software payroll program, and out comes the end. And send it off to the client by email, hopefully secure email, and the client makes the payment.
Yep. So what we have here is there's no differentiation in providing payroll services. So it's a fixed fee. There's price pressures.
It's a price-driven thing. So clients are very keen to get it cheap.
Yeah,
they don't want to pay proper money for it unless they have to.
And it always follows typically the same high-level process. You receive information from clients, preferably within a secure vault, but yeah, clients will send you that information in a variety of formats. That information we have to comprehend it, and we have to enter that information onto another system, be it Sage, Payroll, or whichever system that you use. That information needs to be verified. And once you've verified it as correct, you issue a report, or in some rare cases, the client will trust you to run that payroll themselves. We're looking there at processes that are very, very similar to the ones that we've just looked at very, very quickly that Joe's running live. So Joe can receive information from clients. It can go and look in a secure vault, or it can receive it in a dedicated email.
Absolutely. And this is a sort of a process that's perfect for Joe. You receive information in a specific format. Joe can actually look at that information and say, apply certain rules, apply, what should be the calculation of pension, what should be, all the other payroll related calculations, enter it into the system to get the specific, pay slips out and email the customer. Mm-hmm. Now, typically with processes like this, the biggest pain, and Alan, you can allude to that, is, payroll is very time sensitive. You have times when, if it is a weekly payroll, end of the week, if it's a monthly payroll, end of the month, where you will have to have a spike of effort to make sure that everything's gone out in time.
Yeah.
And, something like Joe can process data and information at probably 10 to 20 times the speed of what a human can do, just because it's completely rule-based. And the biggest benefit is you're not under that time pressure anymore.
And also, Joe works 3 shifts a day if
Correct.
you need him to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yep. 24/7 availability over weekends. So you could, if it's a Monday payroll run, you could leave it on Friday night, and by Monday morning, everything's done.
So what we've got there is we've got what is a fairly manually intensive process that doesn't generate a lot of value, but is essential to deliver, tying down people that now you could release some or all of that process. So there may be elements within there where actually I want to have a manual check and verification in at this stage.
Yes.
But that might be 5-10% of what the end-to-end process was.
Absolutely. And you raise a very good point, Richard, because the beauty of something like this in automation is people get scared of automation because, what are you going to do? Are you going to change my systems? Are you going to change the way I work? Are you going to integrate complex technology? No. Something like Joe does not need any change to your systems. All it needs is an access, a username, password, and an email ID. And Joe's going to work exactly like how your employees are going to work.
So Joe's working like a member of staff.
Absolutely.
And the difference between this member of staff and a human member of staff is it doesn't take holidays. It doesn't go off sick.
Yep.
It can work 3 shifts a day, as Alan points out. And it always does what it's told.
It always does what it's told.
And so it's as simple as train it, you tell it what to do, and set it going. And if you want to change it,
change it. That's
retrain it.
That's it.
So this is pretty simple, isn't it? So that's it. We've done it. We've released the people. We've freed them from the mundane tasks. That's it. We're sorted. Not quite, is it?
Correct. There's another step to this, and if we go to the next slide.
So if we're going to release the potential of advisory work, as we went through in the last presentation, there's some steps to get through, aren't there?
You've got to map where your people are on this journey. So we've got the different levels of service and of advisory service, and we've got appropriate members of the team to actually deliver that. So you've got to look at the employees that are being released by Joe as to what level they are, what capability they have, and what potential they have, and where they fit on this continuum in terms of contributing to the advisory business.
Okay, very good. I've just got a question about who Joe is. We will come back to Joe very shortly. Now we talk about kind of mapping those services and mapping the capability of people, and we talked about looking at the kind of what could be a change in the organizational structure.
Oh, most certainly. One of the exercises I do with my clients is I'll say, we know what your structure is now, but that's written down someplace. Fine, let's get it out, dust it off. But I want you to look forward 3 years. And I want you to look at what the practice is going to be doing, what the structure will need to be, including your technology, in 3 years' time, as best you can tell. And then you need to map across the people you've got with the people you need.
Yep.
And that includes Joe.
Yep. So in doing that, what we're doing is we can see, well, actually, I've got these people doing these roles now to deliver the services that I've mapped out. I'll need people, or I'll need resources with these skills. And I can see, well, actually, these people can follow this journey, and I get some priorities within there. I guess also in spending time looking at your organizational charts today, you can start to identify resources who are by necessity spending a lot of time combing through spreadsheets, flicking between applications, and potentially doing not mundane work, but work that makes them feel something like a robot in order to get tasks done.
Yes, very often people at that level in your business would make ideal customer service liaison people because they care about what's going on.
Yep. Excellent. So working smarter is not about taking a hatchet to the organization structure and saying, well, actually, I could apply robotic process automation software or Agile to these tasks to replace the people. It's actually, I can use this to release time in these people's day that then I can use for either higher value service or identifying potential opportunity. So targeting processes with high potential. Now we've used two very common processes because there's lots of potential within there. The accounts payable, accounts receivable are typically kind of the first places that big firms go to have a look at automation. But those processes where people are flicking between stuff, data entry, receiving data from a lot of places are the ones with the highest potential. The beauty of automation, I think, Ramesh, you hinted at this before, is there's something of the lean startup with this, is you can kind of see, well, there's a direction of travel to go in. I can start quickly and I can deliver it iteratively. So I could target an element of process. It doesn't even have to be an end-to-end process, but there's a lot of activity that happens here that ties down a resource for a period of time, and I can automate that.
Absolutely. It's like the Pareto principle. You might have an activity that, end-to-end process that takes, for example, 6 to 7 hours, but you will find that one part of that process takes 4 hours, which is 50% of the effort. So when you look at automation, you would automate that part first, free up that time, and then do the second phase of automation, which leads to the full process being automated.
And so within that, you identify those candidate processes, and we find that actually that process then to automate that, so to deploy Agile or a digital robot within a client's environment, accessing their systems, it takes about 3 to 5 weeks, and that goes through a number of stages. First thing we do is work out whether it's feasible.
Absolutely.
So there's no point in automating something just for the fun of it, because there has to be a benefit. But that benefit can be calculated very accurately because the assessment actually figures out what it's costing and what the impact of what you're doing is today.
Absolutely. And when we talk about assessment, our feasibility assessment typically focuses on whether whether what you're paying for a Joe, and here the beauty of it is you don't pay any sort of significant upfront fee or development fee. It's a very simple monthly subscription price that you pay. Just think of like hiring a worker.
Yep.
You would hire a digital worker. So you pay a monthly salary to Joe.
Yeah. So it's like taking on a temp, but taking on the most reliable temp.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you hire a temp. Is hiring that temp to do that task, is it financially prudent? And you look at it, probably the temp works at a very high speed with a very high level of accuracy. That's Joe. Make sure that business case fits what you want to derive, what you want to do in terms of freeing up that capacity. And then you would go into actually documenting that process and delivering it. So what we mean by that is in most businesses, where Richard talked earlier about gray hair and the experience, what we find, and Alan, you can allude to this, is that the experience of delivering a process is 9 times out of 10 is stored in the head of a business user. It's never documented anywhere.
Absolutely.
It's never written anywhere.
I mean, we've looked at processes recently when we've done this where they are ISO 9001. They have documented working instructions, but the reality at the fingers on keyboards is somewhat different to the steps in the working instruction.
I was going to echo that, because in my experience, even if it is written down, it's probably wrong.
So
it's how they did it.
A few years
ago.
So as a byproduct of this process, it's documented, and I guess that's there to protect everybody. That's the baseline. That's where we start from.
Correct, and you document the tacit information. That's your asset to have, because tomorrow, even if you're hiring somebody and training somebody, you have a documented process to follow.
And then once it's been proved, you can then start to roll out, and actually, the model that we deploy is there's no cost incurred until somebody is validated that the process is in place.
Absolutely.
Which then means that the benefits, if there's a cost saving to be made or there's value to be gained, those benefits can be realized immediately.
I mean, I think in terms of technology, a digital worker or Joe is probably the only technology out there that you derive savings from day one.
Okay. So I've got another good question in there, which is again something that I can pick up in the Q&A at the end. So it's enabled by technology. Now, a lot of times we'll look at this, and the first thing that anybody will look at is, does this reduce me cost? And I would say 8-9 times out of 10, the processes that we automate first, there will be a cost saving. It'll be a task that's costing hundreds of pounds a month. And the cost to automate that will be hundreds of pounds minus a bit. So there will be a cost saving. But actually the benefits come in the outcomes that it delivers.
Absolutely.
So we get increased capacity. So if we look at that payroll, where actually one of the barriers to growth might be, actually, are there those skilled resources you can come in who are willing to do that task to the required level of accuracy with the month-end stress? That can turn into a constraint on capacity. If you've got something that can do it 20 times faster, well, suddenly you've released that constraint. Quality is assured, because once the rules are in place, it follows it the same place every time. And of course, in security and compliance, you're not letting any information out to your business. And actually, some of the steps that you need to put in place to ensure GDPR compliance, such as things must be placed in a secure vault or in a portal for a client to access, that's just created 2, 3, 4 more manual steps for the human who's doing it. Actually, that's easily managed by
And interestingly, Richard, there's one other benefit of this, because let's say, there's, as humans, when we do a piece of work, we're not going to document every step that we do in our life. Today morning at 9:01, I did this. At 9:03, I did this. We're not going to do that. It's literally impossible. But for Joe, that's an automatic concept. So if you go back to your mail and see, what did Joe do on 22nd of May? You have a complete detailed audit log of what Joe did.
Yep.
And it's traceability, it's, Compliance.
So, I'm going to go to a level of technical thing, but what that's doing is that's starting to give you metadata about the process. So it's describing what's happening when that process is taking place.
Absolutely.
So we've looked at one particular client's work where we've been looking at their invoicing process, and not only do you get these were the invoices processed, it was actually these were the invoices that needed queries, and these were the suppliers it came from, and suddenly you have management information about that process that otherwise you wouldn't have had. So I know we've got some questions, and I know we move forward. So I'll summarize very quickly what we've kind of gone through. So advisory work represents an opportunity. That's been a key thrust of the whole series. But seizing that opportunity requires breaking free of compliance lock. Breaking free means releasing the people, but not getting rid of people. It is releasing them from those tasks that make them feel like robots because they're mundane and repetitive. Automation technology can tackle those processes and take those fingers off keyboards. And that's where it releases the people. And it doesn't require a long period of consultancy and business analysis work. Actually, identifying those candidate processes can be done very quickly, and actually testing whether they can be automated can be done really quickly. That's a 20-minute, half an hour conversation. And actually you can then validate whether it's economic to go to. And by starting small and taking small steps, you can start to move at your own pace through the process. So I spotted some questions coming in here. So the first one is so someone said, Joe seems very theoretical, trying to get the context of how Joe integrates into a practice.
Okay.
So Joe is pure technology, really.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So let me deconstruct it for you a bit. So there is technology out there today called robotic process automation. So effectively, for tasks that are very repetitive, that are rule-based, that is depending on structured data. So for example, taking data from one system, putting it into the other, like what Richard explained earlier, processing a set of invoices, whether it is payroll processes, anything that's repetitive, that is rule-based, which people spend a lot of time doing. Today, you can train a software robot, or what is better known as a digital workmate, to do that for you. In our world, our digital worker or digital workmate is called Joe. There's a personality because Joe works with business users. So it's actually technology that is deployed. But the good news is you don't have to deploy anything. You don't have to change your systems. You don't have to integrate anything. For Joe to work on your systems, on a process, think of hiring a temporary worker, only that in this case, it's a digital worker. So what would you do when you hire a worker? You would give that person an email ID and you would give them access to your system. That's all that you need to give Joe, an email ID and a username password, and Joe will be trained. So what we do is we will train Joe on the process. We will make sure that Joe executes the process every day and gives you a detailed output every day. And that, as per an SLA, that would be signed up. So for a practice, it doesn't matter if you're a small practice, a medium-sized, or a large practice. If you have a repeated, boring process, Joe can get it done in a matter of weeks.
Which rolls perfectly into this question, which is, I love this question, so thank you for asking it. You've made all of this sound extremely simple. Are there challenges in applying automation?
Actually, that's a fantastic question because, we shouldn't see automation as a silver bullet for all the world problems. Mm-hmm. What we find in our experience working with small to medium-sized organizations and large organizations is that there is a lot of automation possibility. But where does your business get the maximum returns in automation? That should be the focus of the initial set of automation processes. So the first thing that we do when we sit down with the prospect is to look at all the processes that have a potential for automation and select the best candidate processes for automation. And that selection, there is a methodology through which we do it. It's based on the business benefits. It's based on the freed up time that it creates. It's based on volume of transactions. There are a number of things to consider. The reason we do that is selecting a wrong process for automation can be disaster. You won't get the benefits, and you will spend a lot of time and money going after something that's totally meaningless. So it is very, very important. So anything, when you embark on a journey, the selection of the candidate and structuring that into a meaningful list is very important. And we help you with that. That's something that, with our experience, we can guide you with.
And that leads very much into the next question is, do we map the processes and see which can be automated, or does the accounting firm do this before engaging you? The answer to that is very simple, actually. We work with the firm to identify areas where processes might exist. We can assess the automation feasibility within a process very quickly. Typically, I mentioned before, 25, 30 minutes will give us an idea of, okay, the systems involved, the steps involved, the decisions involved, which areas could be automated. It doesn't require, and I love this, is having worked with big technology in the past where, you have the software license and you have 3 times that amount in kind of professional services to make it work for you. This is kind of a process where you can look at somebody's business model, somebody's practice, and in 2 to 3 hours identify
absolutely
4 or 5 processes that can be done.
Yes.
We'll then typically go away and examine those processes in more detail.
Yeah.
Away from that, and that can all be done remotely. From there, then you have the business cases of
absolutely,
this is what it's costing, this is what the impact would be, and somebody's then able to make an informed decision of this is the ideal process number 1, but actually there's the beginning of a roadmap.
Absolutely.
And the time invested from the practice in actually doing that might be no more than 1 to 2 hours.
Correct. In fact, what's worked very well with us at some of our customers, Richard, as you would know, is they've spent 30 minutes talking to different parts of the organization, saying which are the painful tasks you have, which takes you maximum time on computers. Mm-hmm. Just put a list. Doesn't matter it's automatable or not. Put the list down together. You have a list of 10 processes, let's say. Let's come and have a look. Let's have a discussion. In a couple of hours, we can shortlist the 3 best ones for you to look at initially, and 2 best ones. And that's the way to start.
Excellent. And the other point is in terms of kind of the human element to it, is how do you start tackling it? And this will end up being theoretical, but how do you sell in the benefit to a human of working with a digital workmate? So I guess that's a question for all of us to look at, really.
I guess in my experience, it's about taking away the drudgery and developing that person's skill set to move up the organization.
Mm-hmm. So there's a benefit there in terms of and in a lot of cases, the model is you have to bring in a junior member of staff and train them, because that's cheaper than going and finding a ready-made member of staff. You then have to retain that member of staff. So if you can provide them with a personal development plan and there's some degree of succession within that, I guess there's a benefit within that.
Absolutely. And I'll give you an anecdote which which will resonate well. We worked with a healthcare firm, and one of the things that they came up with, they had a open innovation day, and where they had to bring up ideas into the table. And there was a team of 10 people who was been with the company for many years, and they came out with 14 different ideas. So the operations manager asked, fantastic ideas. Why didn't you bring this to us before? You've been here for a long time. And the answer they gave was, well, if we had bought these ideas any earlier, we would have had to do it, and we don't have the time to do it. Now we have Joe.
Yeah. So again, that capacity creates new possibilities as well. So I'm aware now that we're keeping you over our allotted time, so I will close up. Before I move on, if there are questions that you have that we've not covered, that you've not raised here and now this morning, if you want to fire them to me, my email address is richard@vaultconnect.co.uk, and I can get answers from both. Alternatively, if you wanted to fire a question directly at Alan, your email address is?
Alan@MRWC for Charlie, S for Sugar, MRWCS.com.
And mine is ramesh@cevitr.com, which is ramesh@cevitr.com.
Fantastic. So as I get forward, so we've referred back a fair bit to content that we've done in the previous webinars. So if you go on to vaultconnect.co.uk, you can access any of that content on demand. The one question that I didn't come to was, are copies of the slides available after this? A recording of the entire webinar is available. And if you'd like the slides, email me and I'll send you a PDF with all the information in it. So that's been it. Thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you found that valuable and useful. Thank you, Alan.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks everybody for joining. I think we had some very good questions today as well.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.